My parents disowned me. I left with just $1,000. Built a fortune. Now my entitled cousin thinks she deserves a cut because family comes first. Everyone is convinced of that false cause, but I am not. Growing up, I always felt like the odd one out in my family. It was like my parents had a specific mold they expected me to fit, but no matter how hard I tried, I was always falling short. My older brothers, Sam and Luke, seemed to embody everything my parents valued: academic success, career-minded ambition, and respect for tradition. Sam became a lawyer, and Luke went into medicine, and each of their achievements was celebrated like it was some grand family legacy. And then there was me, Daniel, the one who didn't follow the script. From a young age, I felt the weight of my parents' disappointment. They weren't overly cruel or anything, but the way they looked at me, the helpful suggestions, the constant comparisons to Sam and Luke, it was suffocating. I had different ambitions. I was interested in tech, in building things, in creating something unique. But that didn't exactly fit into their vision. To them, I was supposed to choose something respectable, something they could brag about at family gatherings. It was clear to me that I was never going to be enough for them. When I turned 18, I knew I couldn't stay. Leaving wasn't easy. In fact, it was probably the hardest decision I've ever made. But I couldn't keep living in a house where I felt like a failure every day. My parents barely put up a fight. My mom gave me a quiet hug, my dad gave a brisk nod, and that was it. I packed a few bags, took what little money I had saved, and left. No grand goodbye, no promises to keep in touch. I was on my own, and while it felt terrifying, it was also liberating. Starting fresh wasn't glamorous. I took the first job I could find, scraping by with barely enough to cover rent. But as hard as it was, I was free. I didn't have anyone breathing down my neck, didn't have to deal with their disappointment. Over time, things got better. I worked my way up in the tech industry, learned new skills, and eventually landed a stable position at a promising startup. I threw myself into my work, and after a few years, I started to see the fruits of my labor. Promotions came, and eventually, I made a bit of money on some smart investments. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to make me comfortable, something I never thought I'd have. Years passed, and I found myself with a life I was proud of. I didn't have a big family to lean on, but I had peace and freedom, and that was enough for me. I hadn't heard from my family in years, aside from a few obligatory holiday messages from my mom. I assumed they were living their lives, same as me, and I was content to leave it that way. A few months ago, out of nowhere, I got a message from my cousin Maddie. Growing up, Maddie and I had been close. She was a few years younger, always a bit of a troublemaker, but fun to be around. We drifted apart after I left, partly because she stayed close with the family, adopting their views and criticisms. I hadn't thought much about her over the years, so seeing her name on my phone was surprising. Her message was simple but immediately made me uncomfortable. She said she needed my help, financial help, specifically. She told me that things had taken a bad turn for her, that she was desperate and didn't have anyone else to turn to. It sounded like a typical sob story, and part of me instantly doubted her. Why was she coming to me now, after all this time? And why was she acting like I owed her anything? She ended the message with, "Family sticks together, right?" That line bothered me. Where was that family loyalty when I was struggling to get on my feet? Where was it when I left home with nothing and didn't hear a peep from anyone for years? I wanted to ignore her, to shut down the request without a second thought. But that nagging feeling of guilt crept in. After all, she was family, and as much as I hated to admit it, a part of me still felt some responsibility to help. I messaged her back, keeping things short and direct. I told her I'd consider helping but only if she could explain what led to her situation. Her response came quickly, and she promised to call the next day to explain everything. I didn't really want to open that door, but a conversation seemed harmless enough. I could hear her out, and if it didn't feel right, I could still decline. The next day, Maddie called, and I answered with mixed feelings. Her voice sounded shaky, and she immediately launched into a story about how she lost her job, how her rent was overdue, and how she felt like her world was crumbling. She told me she'd reached out to others in the family, but they couldn't or wouldn't help her. She emphasized how abandoned she felt, how she thought she could always count on family, and how she never thought she'd be in a position to ask for this kind of help. "Family is supposed to stick together, Dan," she said, her voice wavering. "I don't know who else to turn to." There was a dramatic pause after that, and I'll admit I felt a pang of sympathy. But something still didn't sit right with me. Maddie was always good at spinning stories, and part of me wondered if she was exaggerating her situation. But hearing her sound so desperate, I started to question myself. Maybe I was being too cynical. After all, People fall on hard times, right? I agreed to help, but I made it clear I wasn't going to become her personal bank. I'd send enough to cover her rent for the next few months, but that was it, no further assistance unless there was a real emergency. She accepted, sounding genuinely grateful, and for a brief moment, I felt like I'd done the right thing. However, things didn't stay quiet for long. Within days of sending her the money, I started getting messages from other family members, people I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly reaching out to ask why I wasn't doing more for Maddie. It was like she'd flipped a switch, alerting everyone to the fact that I'd helped her, but apparently not enough. My brother Sam even sent a snide message accusing me of being stingy with family. I felt blindsided. How had this spiraled so quickly? It was clear Maddie had told everyone I'd helped her, but somehow she'd spun the story to make it sound like I was holding out, like I wasn't doing my family duty. Suddenly, I was the bad guy again. The one who wasn't stepping up, the one who wasn't loyal. The old resentment resurfaced, and I was torn. Part of me wanted to pull back completely, but the guilt was there, gnawing at me just like it always had. I wondered if I'd made a huge mistake by helping her in the first place, by opening that door. And if so, I didn't know how to close it again without tearing open old wounds. This was just the beginning, and I had a feeling things were about to get messy. When Maddie called again, her voice was more frantic than before, and I could feel the manipulation even as she pretended to just check in. She thanked me profusely for the money, then quickly shifted the conversation to how she'd had another financial emergency. Something about her car breaking down and how she wouldn't be able to get to job interviews without it. It was a classic bait and switch, making it sound like she was just updating me on her struggles, only to turn it into a new request. I should have known better, but I found myself feeling bad for her all over again. After all, she was family. I reluctantly agreed to send a little more, but I reminded her again that I wasn't a constant source of support. This had to be a one-time thing. She promised that she understood, that she wouldn't bother me again, and thanked me in that sweet, overly sincere tone she always used when she got her way. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. My phone started lighting up with messages and calls from family members who hadn't bothered with me in years. First, it was my brother Sam, who, as usual, went straight to making me feel like I'd somehow let everyone down. He was blunt, calling me stingy and saying that as the one making it big in tech, I should be doing more for the family. I tried to explain that I'd already helped Maddie twice, but Sam brushed it off, saying, "Family is forever, Dan. You don't get to pick and choose when you help." The irony of that statement hit me like a punch in the gut. Where was that family loyalty when I was struggling to get by, working multiple jobs just to afford a tiny apartment? No one had offered to help me then, and I didn't expect them to. But now that I'd built something of my own, they were acting like it was their right to claim a part of it. I didn't respond to Sam, just ended the conversation, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Then my mother called. She rarely reached out, and it was usually for birthdays or holiday pleasantries, so I figured it was another half-hearted attempt at checking in. But as soon as I answered, I could tell this wasn't going to be a light-hearted call. "Daniel," she began, her voice stern. "I heard you've been helping Maddie, but only a little." I felt my jaw clench. "Yes, Mom, I've helped her twice already, and she keeps coming back with more requests." "Well," she said, her tone cold. "You're doing well for yourself, aren't you? Surely you can manage a bit more for family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother, who hadn't shown any real interest in my life or my successes, was now acting as if my financial stability was somehow theirs to manage. I tried to tell her that I'd set clear boundaries with Maddie, that I'd done my part, but she cut me off, saying, "Family is a lifetime responsibility, Daniel. You don't get to walk away just because you're better off now." That was the kicker. Better off in their eyes, maybe. But the years I'd spent struggling, working late nights, and scraping by just to get where I was now, none of that seemed to matter to them. They saw the end result and assumed I owed it to them somehow, as if they had been part of my journey all along. After that call, I started noticing a pattern. Every day, I'd get a message from a different family member, each one echoing the same sentiment. I was obligated to help Maddie. That I owed it to her and to the family. It was like they'd all coordinated this twisted intervention, trying to guilt me into submission. Maddie, meanwhile, kept reaching out with sob stories about her never-ending struggles and how grateful she was to have me in her life. The strangest part was that she seemed to be subtly increasing her demands with each message. At first, it was rent money, then car repairs. Then she hinted at her medical bills, mentioning health issues she'd never talked about before. She even suggested that she might need help with legal fees after a supposed tenant dispute with her landlord. I could tell she was trying to reel me in, creating this web of endless problems so that I'd feel like I had no choice but to keep helping her. One night, after yet another message from her, I found myself sitting in my apartment, staring at my phone, feeling completely overwhelmed. I had tried to cut ties with this family, to move on and build a life where I wasn't constantly judged or weighed down by their expectations. Yet here I was, being dragged back into their orbit, guilt-tripped and manipulated as if I were still that confused, insecure kid they brushed aside. The worst part was that some small part of me still wanted their approval. As much as I hated to admit it, I still felt that old, familiar urge to please them, to be accepted. But every time I gave in, I could feel a piece of myself slipping away, like I was losing control of the life I'd fought so hard to create. Finally, I decided to confront Maddie. I told her that I was done with the constant requests, that I'd helped her as much as I could, and that she needed to find another way to manage her finances. Her reaction was immediate and harsh. She went from sweet and apologetic to cold and accusatory in a heartbeat. "So that's it?" she spat, her tone dripping with disdain. "You're just going to cut me off after everything I've been through?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Maddie, I've already sent you money twice. I'm not your personal bank." "Oh, so that's how it is," she sneered. "I thought we were family, Dan. I thought we looked out for each other. I guess I was wrong." Hearing her say that stung, and she knew it. She knew exactly what buttons to press, and she pressed them all. She went on ranting about how I'd turned my back on family and how selfish I'd become now that I was doing well. She even suggested that I was somehow responsible for her current situation because I hadn't stayed in touch, as if my absence had caused her problems. The conversation left me drained, but it also clarified something. Maddie, and by extension, the rest of my family, didn't actually care about me. They cared about what I could do for them. They cared about the money, the support, the convenience of having someone they could lean on. Family was just a word to them, a means of controlling me and guilting me into submission. That night, I decided I was done with the games. I tried to be generous, to be the bigger person, but it was clear that nothing I did would ever be enough. I'd always be the outsider. The one who owed them for daring to find success on my own. They could keep their expectations, their guilt, and their misplaced sense of entitlement. I wasn't going to let them take away the life I built for myself. The next day, I blocked Maddie's number, along with several others who had hounded me in the days since she first reached out. I knew it would cause a backlash, that I'd probably get bombarded with angry messages and accusations, but I didn't care. For the first time, I was choosing my own well-being over their approval, and it felt like a huge weight had been lifted. In the days that followed, there was radio silence. I braced myself for the inevitable blow-up, the flood of messages from my family demanding to know why I'd cut Maddie off. But none came, and for a brief, blissful moment, I thought maybe they'd finally given up. But of course, it wasn't that simple. Maddie had only just begun to stir the pot, and it wouldn't be long before the rest of the family came after me with even greater force, armed with her twisted version of the truth. As I'd soon find out, she wasn't going to stop until she turned everyone against me for good. It didn't take long for Maddie to retaliate. The messages from my family, which had briefly quieted down after I blocked her, started again with renewed intensity. This time, they were even more pointed, angrier, and shockingly misinformed. The first one came from my brother Luke, and as soon as I read it, my heart sank. "Daniel, how could you leave Maddie in the lurch like that?" he wrote. "Mom and Dad are so disappointed in you. I didn't think you'd turn your back on family just because you're rich now." Rich. That word immediately set off alarm bells. I wasn't rich by any stretch. I had a comfortable life, sure, but it wasn't like I was some millionaire living in a mansion. Where was he getting this idea? And the way he put rich in quotes made it seem like I'd somehow flaunted it or lorded it over the family, which was the exact opposite of what I'd done. The more I read his message, the angrier I got. It was clear Maddie had fed him some twisted version of events. She must have told him I was living lavishly while refusing to lift a finger to help her, painting me as the bad guy in a way only she could. I tried to respond rationally, explaining that I had already helped Maddie twice and that I wasn't in a position to be her endless financial safety net. But Luke didn't want to hear it. He shot back almost immediately, accusing me of letting success go to my head and reminding me that family is all we have. I could barely get a word in before he blocked me, clearly convinced by Maddie's version of the story. It wasn't just Luke. Within days, my entire family seemed to have heard about my so-called abandonment of Maddie. My phone blew up with messages from cousins, aunts, uncles, people I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly flooding my inbox with disapproval and disappointment. My Aunt Nancy, who'd always been the type to gossip and stir the pot, went as far as to say, "Maddie's struggling, and all you care about is hoarding your precious money." It's disgusting, Daniel, disgusting. The audacity was almost laughable. Here I was, someone who'd had to make it on his own, who had scraped by for years without a shred of support from any of them. And now that I'd found some stability, they had the nerve to imply I owed it all to them, that my success was somehow a shared asset. I was furious, but I also knew I needed to get to the bottom of what exactly Maddie had told them. So I decided to confront her directly. I unblocked her and sent a curt message telling her we needed to talk. She responded almost immediately, agreeing to a call. Her tone seemed innocent, even cheerful, as if she had no idea why I'd be upset. When I finally called her, I skipped the pleasantries and went straight to the point. "Maddie, what exactly have you been telling everyone about me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. There was a pause, and I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she tried to come up with an answer. "I haven't been telling anyone anything, Dan. I just mentioned that I was struggling and you weren't as supportive as I hoped, that's all." "Not as supportive as you hoped?" I repeated, incredulous. I repeated, "Maddie, I sent you money twice, and I made it clear that I couldn't keep doing it, but somehow everyone thinks I'm rich and abandoning you. Where did that come from?" She sighed. A theatrical sound that grated on my nerves. "I mean, you're doing pretty well, aren't you? I don't see why it's a big deal for you to help family a little more. It's not like you can't afford it." I felt my patience slipping. "Maddie, that's not the point. The point is you're spreading lies, making it sound like I'm hoarding money while you're on the verge of homelessness. And now everyone in the family is turning against me because of it." She didn't even flinch. Instead, her tone turned cold, her words cutting. "Well, maybe you should think about why everyone believes me, Dan. Maybe it's because you've always been the one who turns his back on us. It's not like you've been a real part of this family anyway." I was stunned. She twisted the situation so skillfully, framing herself as the victim and me as the ungrateful outsider. And deep down, she knew exactly what buttons to push, the old insecurities she could exploit. It was like she had no remorse for the chaos she'd caused, no hesitation about lying to everyone to get what she wanted. "Listen, Maddie," I said, my voice barely concealing my anger. "This is going to stop. I've done enough. I'm not sending you another cent, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth about what you've been doing." That got a reaction. Maddie's tone shifted, a mix of anger and panic. "Oh, so now you're going to play the victim? You think anyone's going to take your side over mine? I'm the one who's been struggling, who's been there for the family. You're just the one who walked away and never looked back." The sheer nerve of her words left me speechless. After everything, she still saw herself as the victim, still believed she had every right to demand my support without giving anything in return. I ended the call, knowing I'd get nowhere with her. But it wasn't just Maddie. Somehow, she'd managed to twist the entire family into thinking I was the selfish one, that I owed them something just because I'd found success on my own. I wasn't sure how to fix this, or if it could even be fixed. In the days that followed, I tried to reach out to a few family members, explaining my side, detailing what I'd done for Maddie and the boundaries I'd set. But every call, every message, was met with suspicion or outright hostility. My mom accused me of making excuses and trying to look like the good guy, while my dad told me that I should have expected this after the way I abandoned the family. It was like trying to fight a wildfire with a garden hose. No matter what I said, Maddie's narrative had already taken root, and my attempts to set the record straight only seemed to make them more determined to see me as the villain. In one final attempt to salvage some truth, I messaged Sam. I figured if anyone might listen, it would be him. He'd always been the reasonable one growing up, the peacemaker in family arguments. I told him everything, how I'd helped Maddie, the boundaries I'd set, and how she turned everyone against me. I poured my heart into that message, hoping he'd see the situation for what it was. But his response shattered that last bit of hope. He wrote back a few hours later, saying, "Dan, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this isn't the brother I remember. Maybe you should take a step back and look at yourself. We're family. It's not about boundaries, it's about being there when it counts." That was it. I was officially the family outcast, painted as the selfish, ungrateful brother who'd forgotten where he came from. I couldn't fight it anymore. They'd made their decision, and no amount of truth would change their minds. A few days later, I deleted all their numbers from my phone. The constant pressure, the guilt-tripping, the manipulation, I couldn't take it anymore. I wasn't going to be their scapegoat, the one they guilt and shamed whenever it suited them. If they wanted to believe Maddie's lies, then so be it. I was done trying to win their approval or justify my choices. It was painful letting go of that last shred of family connection. As messed up as things were, they were still my family, and part of me had always hoped we'd find a way to reconnect. But this whole ordeal had shown me just how deeply entrenched their expectations were and how little they actually cared about my happiness or well-being. So I let them go. I let go of the need for their acceptance, their approval. It hurt more than I thought it would, but it was also freeing. For the first time, I felt like I could live my life without looking over my shoulder, without worrying about their opinions. Maddie had won, in a way. She turned them all against me, and they bought into her story without a second thought. But in the end, I realized it didn't matter. I didn't need their validation or their love if it came with strings attached, if it only existed as long as I was useful. I'd lost my family. To them, it was over. I'd lost my family, but in a strange way, I'd also found something I'd been missing all along: freedom. After cutting ties, I thought that would be the end of it. I braced myself for the empty space, the absence of family, and told myself that I'd move forward. But a part of me still wanted answers. The way Maddie had spun her lies, the way everyone believed her without a second thought, it gnawed at me. So, I decided to dig deeper. If I was going to walk away, I wanted to know the truth once and for all. I started by doing some casual online sleuthing. I looked up Maddie's social media profiles, scrolling through her posts and piecing together bits of her life she hadn't told me about. It didn't take long to realize that her story didn't add up. For someone on the verge of losing everything, she was doing surprisingly well. Her feed was full of smiling photos from beach vacations, weekends at trendy restaurants, and shopping sprees that didn't exactly scream financial hardship. And then there was the kicker: a photo of her car, newly repaired, with a caption about finally getting things fixed. The same car she claimed was too broken down for her to get to work, the car for which she begged me for money. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. It was clear that Maddie had lied, spinning an elaborate tale of hardship to squeeze money out of me. I wanted to confront her with what I'd found, but I knew better than to think she'd feel any remorse. So, I took a different approach. I reached out to a few family members, not to plead my case, but to share what I discovered. I sent them screenshots of her vacation photos, her shopping trips, the evidence of her lies. At first, there was radio silence. Then, predictably, the backlash started. Instead of admitting they'd been wrong, several family members doubled down, accusing me of invading Maddie's privacy and going out of my way to make her look bad. My own mother messaged me, saying, "Daniel, I don't know why you're doing this. Maddie's going through a rough time, and instead of helping her, you're stalking her online to prove some point." Stalking her? I couldn't believe it. Here I was, just trying to show them the truth, and they were acting like I was the villain. Maddie must have realized she was backed into a corner because she called me the next day, her tone icy and accusatory. "Really, Daniel?" she snapped as soon as I answered. "You're so desperate to make me look bad that you're digging into my life, spying on me. What's wrong with you?" I laughed, unable to contain my disbelief. "Spying on you, Maddie? You posted all of it publicly. I'm just showing everyone what you didn't tell them, that you're not exactly struggling the way you made it sound." She scoffed. "Oh please, you know nothing about my life. Maybe I deserve those vacations after everything I've been through. Or is it such a crime to want a little happiness?" The entitlement in her voice was staggering. She genuinely believed she was in the right, that she had every reason to manipulate me and anyone else who'd fall for her story. And worse, she saw my success as something that belonged, in part, to her. "Look, Maddie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't care about your vacations. What I care about is the fact that you lied to me and the whole family. You turned everyone against me because I wouldn't keep funding your lifestyle. Don't you see how messed up that is?" She paused, and for a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd show a shred of remorse. But instead, she laughed, a short, bitter sound that sent a chill through me. "Look at you, playing the victim," she sneered. "You wouldn't be where you are without this family. Don't pretend you did all this on your own, Daniel. The least you could do is share a little with the people who were there for you." The audacity of her words hit me like a punch. Maddie genuinely believed that my success was a family achievement, that I was somehow indebted to all of them. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell her how hard I'd worked, how I'd sacrificed to get to where I was. But I knew it would fall on deaf ears. "What support, Maddie?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What support did you or anyone else in this family ever give me? I left home with nothing, and no one offered to help me. So, tell me, where exactly does this family debt come from?" She didn't have an answer. Instead, she muttered something about doing what she had to and hung up. The conversation left me feeling more drained than ever, but it also gave me a strange sense of clarity. I'd always known Maddie was manipulative, But hearing her outright say that she felt entitled to my success, like it was some shared inheritance, was a wake-up call. The final straw came when my dad called me a few days later. I picked up, hoping for once he'd actually hear me out, but he went straight into lecturing me, repeating the same tired lines about family duty and putting the family first. I interrupted. "Dad," I interrupted. "Have you even listened to what I've told you? Maddie lied to all of us. She's not struggling. She's living it up and using me to fund it. Can't you see that?" He sighed as if I were the one exhausting him. "Daniel, families go through rough patches. You don't just abandon them because someone made a mistake. Maddie is going through something, and you're making it worse by digging up her personal life and holding it against her." His words confirmed what I'd feared all along. No matter what Maddie did, no matter how blatantly she lied or manipulated, they would always side with her. They saw her as one of them, someone worth standing up for. I, on the other hand, was still the outsider, the one who'd left and was therefore less of a family member. "Fine," I said, finally feeling the last thread of my patience snap. "If that's how you all feel, then I won't bother you with my rich, selfish life anymore. Consider this my final family duty. I'm done. Don't contact me, and don't expect anything from me again." He tried to respond, but I hung up before he could get another word in. I knew it was harsh, but I was done bending over backward to meet their twisted expectations. For years, I'd put up with the silent judgment, the disappointment, the nagging guilt, but this was it. I was severing the cord once and for all. After the call, I sat alone in my apartment, letting the silence settle around me. It felt strange, almost surreal. I'd always thought family was supposed to be a source of support, people who loved you unconditionally. But my family had shown me time and again that their love was conditional, contingent on me being the son they wanted, the brother they approved of, the cousin who'd give without question. In the days that followed, I felt a strange emptiness. It wasn't quite loneliness but more a lingering sadness, a sense of loss for something I'd never really had. I had friends, a fulfilling job, a life that I'd built on my own, but family, real family, had always been just out of reach. Eventually, the sadness turned into something else. Relief. I no longer had to worry about their approval or their guilt trips. I didn't have to bend over backward to prove I was a good son, a good brother, or a good cousin. I was finally free to live my life without looking back. As the weeks passed, I found myself thinking about them less and less. They hadn't reached out again, which confirmed that they truly bought into Maddie's narrative. They'd chosen their side, and I'd chosen mine. It wasn't the ending I'd hoped for, but it was a new beginning. A clean slate where I could finally live on my own terms. I wouldn't lie and say it didn't hurt. Family is supposed to mean something, to be a source of love and support. But I'd learned the hard way that family can also be a source of pain, manipulation, and endless obligation. Letting go wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I deserved better than to be their scapegoat, their backup plan. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I was alone, yes, but I was also free. And as I looked forward to the future, I knew that I'd finally made peace with my past. No more guilt, no more family drama, just me, my life, and the people who truly cared about me on my terms. In the weeks after severing ties, I found myself in a strange place emotionally. I hadn't expected it to feel this final. There was a lingering ache, a subtle emptiness, but also a profound relief. I no longer had to field accusations or guilt-laden messages, no longer had to navigate their endless demands. For the first time, I was truly alone, and it felt freeing. I'd always believed that no matter what, family would come around. Even after years of neglect and judgment, I held out some hope that one day they'd accept me for who I was. But Maddie's betrayal, and their quickness to believe her lies, had shattered that last illusion. I finally saw that no matter what I did, it would never be enough for them. And honestly, that realization was liberating. I focused on my work, poured my energy into my career, and the friendships I'd cultivated over the years. These were people who respected me for who I was, not for what I could give them. They didn't care about my bank account or expect me to solve their problems. They were friends who valued me as a person, and being around them reminded me that I could build my own family, one that didn't come with strings attached. Then, one quiet Sunday, a letter arrived from my mother. It was a strange sensation, seeing her handwriting on the envelope. I hesitated, almost dreading what she might have to say. But curiosity won out. The letter was short, direct, and painfully familiar in tone. She wrote that she was disappointed in my decision to abandon the family, that she couldn't understand why I'd cut them off so harshly. She made no mention of Maddie's lies or the fact that I tried to explain myself. Instead, she repeated the same refrain. Family comes first, no matter what. And then, near the end, she added a line that would have once crushed me. I hope you come to your senses before it's too late. I read those words over and over, feeling the sting of their finality. But for the first time, I didn't feel compelled to fix things, to reach out and explain myself again. The weight of their expectations, the unending need to prove myself, had finally lifted. I knew that no matter what I did, I'd always be the outsider in their eyes, and that was okay. I folded the letter and tucked it away. It was a relic of a part of my life that I was ready to leave behind. I didn't need their acceptance or validation anymore. I had my own life, my own accomplishments, and people who genuinely cared about me. Letting go of my family had been painful, but it was also the healthiest decision I'd ever made. In the end, I realized that family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, understanding, and mutual support. I hadn't found that with them, but I knew I could find it elsewhere. I wasn't defined by their approval, and I wasn't going to live my life trying to meet their impossible expectations. As I looked toward the future, I felt a quiet sense of peace. I was finally free to be myself without the weight of their judgments or demands, and that, I knew, was worth every ounce of heartache I'd endured to get here.